Good evening, Facebookers. Just got back from a rather long trip, as my last post gave details of it. My grandmother passed away. She's a good lady. I'll always have good memories of her. I'm glad she's not in pain anymore. To try to get your sympathy votes, if you wish condolences, do me a favor, buy my books. I mean, they're pretty cheap on Amazon. I think the most expensive one right now is $2.99, and that's cheaper than you can get a decent burger. And if you can't afford the $3, just leave me a review. You guys don't seem to realize how much reviews help us, authors, not just me, all of us. A review on there, not only does it recommend to another person that the book may be okay, so they may take that chance and pay for it and get the story that it tells, but if there are enough reviews on there, that shows Amazon that the book has interest. And in having interest, they are willing to put it on their email list and send it out to other buyers. And whenever you look at a product, down on the bottom, there's this little thing that says, recommended products similar to. So let's say, for instance, my books. Let's say somebody is reading one of R.A. Salvatore's books, which, I mean, they're good books. I enjoy them myself. I had the pleasure of meeting him once. Good guy. But, if my books are getting enough attention, if somebody clicks and looks at one of his books, they may show my book on the same page, and that gives me a higher chance for somebody else to click it and read it, and then I have a new fan person who will share it with their friends, and it's a long process. Every little thing helps, and we kind of need you guys to help us with that. So I'm going to get through the live reading here. I'm not going to stick around too long after the chapter's done. I recently did an experiment for marketing. I'll go into more detail in my blog post, but there's just there's a lot more to this than just sitting down and writing a book. And if it were only that easy, then I think there would be a lot more books out there, or a lot more books that people would know about. But there are thousands of books published every single day, and some of them are decent books. Other books, I don't know if I'd use them for toilet paper. The key to a successful book is not how well you write it. If there's a waterfall flowing and every little water droplet is a book, there's really, the only way that you're going to be able to get your little water droplet to stand out in that flood is by maybe painting it fluorescent orange and putting big signs above it and everything else, which is, that's marketing in a nutshell. And it's a lot easier to do that with you guys' help. But anyway, I'm going to get off my soapbox and we'll get this on with. Another thing. I picked up a book this weekend by Jason Mayer. The Parables of Lucas Fosterman. Excellent book. I got to listen to a live reading of it this weekend. I had read a little bit about it prior to its release, but amazing book. I highly recommend you checking it out. It's a collection of short stories, and from what I've already read and from what I've heard, it's a really good book. So check that out if you guys have a moment. Chapter 15, An Unwelcome Shadow. The golden fields outside of Shadgull City were speckled with tabards of blue and green. Soldiers struck in unison, mimicking the actions of their instructor. Gareth felt his sweat-drenched tunic clinging to his back, warmed by the midday sun. He couldn't recall the last time he'd truly broken a sweat, and now he was covered in the salty substance. He swung his pike outward, striking with the butt end, watching the students follow suit. It was a simple task: train the new recruits and separate the pikesmen from the shieldmen. Service to the Shadgull army was demanding, but he found it to his liking, and it offered a fair amount of coin as a freelance. Master Polearm, a young, out-of-breath voice called from behind him. At ease. Gareth watched the men shoulder their staves and taking rest. Stabbing the butt of his weapon into the dirt, he spun around to find a young man in his late teens standing in salute. A dark green tabard marked with a black trident across his chest burned its contrast into his eyes. Gareth glanced at the man's waist, searching for the circular badge emblazoned upon his sash. "What have you got for me, initiate?" "My lord, the scouts have returned. Arbelan was attacked. We have proof it was the Drew. The reports say they're headed north." Gareth took in the man's words, feeling his rage grow with each syllable. Refusing to let his emotion show in front of the young man, he gave a restrained nod. "Keep me posted. I want to know the second they move south of the gate." The messenger offered salute a second time. "Yes, sir." Gareth waved off his salute, giving a half-assed return. And have Ravion envoy to Evanwood. We need to know why the Alfar allowed the Drew to attack so close to their home without sending message." The messenger nodded and returned to his horse. Climbing up, he positioned himself in the saddle and urged the steed onward. It sprang into action, carrying him out of sight in no time. Gareth spun around and pulled his pike from the ground, returning his attention to the men. "Fall in!" The wilds of Evanwood were a sight to behold, rumored to be the most beautiful place in all of Dalmara. Flowers grew in abundance, animals frolicked in their instinctive lives, and the massive trees loomed over the world, offering shade and comfort to all beneath their canopy. The band of humans rushed through the luscious forest, ignoring all penalty from the natural defenses of the land. Their green tablets cried out in protest against the sharp barbs and rigid branches, ripping free of the layered linen. The snap of a bowstring drew their attention. Weapons at the ready, they took position back to back, searching for the source. To their surprise, they were surrounded by a ring of arrows standing vertical, their heads buried into the dirt. Not only were they surrounded, they were outnumbered. A smooth yet commanding voice echoed from the trees, sending an unsettling chill down their spines. "Why do I have 5 men traipsing through my forest? I have not received so much as a message announcing your arrival." They searched for the unseen speaker, feeling helpless, but resolved in their training. Cowardice was not acceptable, especially while on assignment. It could send the wrong message for the order as a whole. Clenching their weapons, they waited, unsure if they should speak or not. "I see your men of Marbane. Tell me, where's your commander, for I desire to speak with him." "Ravion? Kane? I find it unlikely they would send men into my realm without first contacting me." The slender figure stepped from the trees, revealing his presence to the entrapped men. He stood several inches taller than the average human and carried a superior gracefulness. His armor appeared to be forged of the trees themselves, layered with oak leaves and reinforced with plates of bark. Upon closer inspection, it was clearly made of a finely crafted leather with an expert's tooling, each detail carved to perfection. His hair was tied into a bun at shoulder length and bowstrung across his back. Twin swords rested upon his hips, and a narrow quiver of arrows hung below his kidney. They were not the sight of the Merkafar. They were lost in the sight of the Merkafar, so entranced by his majestic stature that they hadn't seen the others step into sight, their bows drawn and aimed to kill. My lord," one of the spouts gave a respectful bow, finding his tongue. "We were sent by Kane. He ordered us to investigate the silence from Trident. We haven't heard anything from them since Arbelan was attacked." "You seem to have gotten lost. Trident is north of Hero's Gate. You found your way into the lands of Evanwood. But where are my manners? I'm Aldulian Quineus Demari, king of Evanwood and lord of the Merkafar." He gave an exaggerated bow. "As for your assignment, I fear things are worse than your lords realize. The Druafar have returned to the surface. They've amassed an army bred for war, and I fear my people cannot hold them off. Maradar Keep has already fallen to a fraction of their number. He looked at his men, still holding aim on the humans, motioning them to lower their bows. "I assume you'll want to confirm this for yourselves." He raised his hands, giving a gentle wave. The trees behind the scouts began to groan and flex, bending at their trunks. The vines of ivy and barbs crawled away as if they were alive, revealing a path clear of the dense forest. Make haste, for the path will not last long. Once you've reached the wall, you'll find a crack large enough to crawl through. Treason is just on the other side." In the blink of an eye, the king and his men were nowhere to be seen, leaving the scouts to their solitude. Sheathing their weapons, the scouts turned down the path laid out before them. They reached the wall in no time. More than likely some kind of Alfarian magic, they suspected. As promised, there was a break in the thick stones, just wide enough for a single man to slip through. One by one, they crawled to the other side, finding a different world, where the forest had been warm in the midday sun. This new realm was cold and dark, as if nightfall had somehow fallen inside the 30-foot stone barrier. Aldridge was beginning to slow for the evening. It had been a hot, sticky day in the summer heat, but the cool evening air was beginning to settle for the night. Kane stood at the edge of town, watching the forest road, not far in the distance. His breastplate shined. New floaty things across the screen caught me off guard. Not far in the distance. His breastplate shined in the fading sun, displaying two brilliant symbols upon each of his shoulders, announcing his affiliations. The right side was engraved with a smoked trident trimmed in emerald, while the left radiated a faint glow from the brick tower, seemingly applied through magic rather than alteration. Thank you for the share, Lori. His patience was wearing thin. They should have returned nearly 4 hours ago, he fumed, concerned by their absence. He glanced up at the sun, watching the last slither disappear behind the horizon. "I can't wait any longer." Sighing heavily, he turned and made his way for the tower. Perhaps the Magi will be able to scry on them and explain their late arrival. A glimmer of hope growing inside him, he passed through the large iron gates and set into the brick walls. Continuing up the winding walkway, he stepped through the red stone archway, feeling the power of the boss wash over him. The haze-filled grounds cleared, illuminated by a floating orb of various colored light. The towering structure shot into the sky as far as he could see, disappearing beyond the rolling clouds above. The tower's front entrance stood open, inviting him in. Kane stepped into the perfect-sized door, watching the breezeway expand before him. A row of Templars stood along each side, awaiting their need of service. Catching sight of their commander at the entrance, they snapped to attention, raising their pikes to form an archway. The armored warriors paused a moment, giving them time to perform the armored warrior paused a moment, giving them time to perform the unnecessary ceremony. He stepped through, acknowledging each man, silently reciting their names and family status. It wasn't a common practice, but he felt an important one. Even if he didn't put it into words, it showed the men that he cared about them and would personally see to their families' well-being in the event of their death. Wars could be won or lost with the loyalty a man felt for his commander, and he wasn't going to fall short. He reached the opening at the far end of the entrance, stepping through, taken back by the sight as always. The room went on for what seemed like forever, unconfined to the size of the outside structure. The main room, a greeting area for visitors, was filled with rugs of the finest quality covering the floors. Their extravagant colors splayed out, intertwining with each other in the most fantastic ways. A large tapestry hung from the walls, displaying wondrous depictions of mighty wizards and battles long fought. Frames hung here and there, the occupants moving about and interacting with the world around them. It was quite a sight to behold. Servants and apprentices alike rushed about, obeying the request of their masters. It was utter chaos in the most organized way imaginable. He passed the dancing colors and turned to face a well-fed woman sitting on the back side of a large oaken desk. She wore a fine blue dress with white lace. Her spectacles were crescent-shaped, barely covering her eyes, and her long brown hair dangled over a large tomb resting in front of her. She glanced up at the man overlooking her. "Good evening, Master Kane. How fares the heat outside?" "It's cooling off a bit, but I fear it'll return in the morning." "I don't mean to be rude, but I must speak with Relevant immediately. Can you tell him I'm on my way?" The portly woman gave a half-hearted smile. "Not a problem. I'll inform him." Kane stepped into the small archway off the side of the room. There was no floor nor ceiling, just an empty void save for the strange illumination that caused the walls to glow a light blue. Both the floor and ceiling were black as a starless night. He envisioned the mage, forcing all of his will into the man's image. The light blue radiating from the walls pulsed and twisted. Within a moment it shifted to a bright orange and began to spin. The greeting room faded from view, surrounding him in the dizzying orange. His stomach churned with the changing colors, growing more and more intense. Just when he thought he was going to lose himself in the chamber, it returned to its calm blue, revealing a different room where the first had been. Taking a heavy breath, he settled his stomach and stepped into the large study. The room was packed full of shelves, overflowing with books of all colors and sizes. There was a large oak table in the center with a single matching chair. Racks and curtains hung in various places, leaving much of the floor open but cluttered. The far end of the room was draped by a large white curtain dividing the study from the bedchamber, magically hovering in place. A slightly overweight human appeared through the hovering barrier, as if he were a ghost. The dangling cloth remained stationary despite his passing. He wore a white sleeping robe and had a matching tapered hat on his head with a single puffy ball at the end. His short curly hair was golden brown, and his pale white skin contained many freckles. A hearty yawn escaped him, and he stretched, flexing his back. "What can I do for you this evening, my friend?" Relevant asked, wiping the sleep from his eyes. "I'm sorry to wake you. I know you have much to do, and sleep can be a rare commodity, but I have a terrible feeling that something big is about to happen." Generally, when one feels such emotion, they are rarely wrong. The question is, where and when is this big event to take place? Relevant cracked a slight smile, knowing that Cain hated how the Magi turned even the simplest statement into the most detailed philosophy. Cain gave a weary smile, realizing his friend was picking on him. "I sent a group to scout Trident. They should have returned hours ago. We've received several reports of Drew activity, but we can't dispatch the armies until we have solid evidence they're headed this way. I can't get any of them to mobilize until I have something substantial. And thus far I have nothing but aftermath. Cain, I'm a wizard of the tower. I do not require schooling in customs and regulations of the Union. Part of my wizardly responsibilities is to maintain and manage these relations." Cain sighed deeply, realizing his friend's accuracy. I'm sorry, Relevant. I've traveled with you how long?" 6 years, Relevant interjected. The warrior placed his hand on one of the small tables, feeling it creak beneath his weight. "Yes, and in those 6 years, I learned your responsibilities very well. As you've learned mine. I ask you, in that time, how many times were my instincts wrong? I assure you something is happening, and I fear this absence is directly connected to it." Relevant flicked his wrist, walking towards the study table, decorating the center of the room. "Very well, my friend. I trust you. If it'll make you happy, and allow me to get back to sleep, I'll scry on them. Dead or alive, we'll at least discover the information they carry." A thick tome with a dark brown binding flew from the shelf and landed softly on the table in front of the mage. Relevant opened the book, as if the correct page was already marked. He grabbed a bowl of sparkly dust from one of the shelves and sprinkled a small amount over the exposed pages, reading a small incantation. "Aclu flico cania vidu cadis." The room faded black, revealing a circular light over the book. The inside showed the meeting between the scouts and the Alfaran king. The scouts stepped onto a clear path and disappeared. The light followed the king and his men to a secluded grove deep within the forest heart. "The Druafar are attained upon this land. They must be stopped," Aldul demanded, spitting on the ground. For an Alfar, he seemed very human in trait, save for his pointed ears and his affinity for natural-looking garments. "I have a favor to ask," the Merkafar king continued. "You have but to name it." The man's face was concealed by the shadow, but his voice sounded familiar. "Do all within your power to gather the human lands. Make them aware of the threat upon us. My men will keep an eye on the Druafar movement. When time comes, the Merkafar will stand with you in battle." The two spoke as equals in the privacy of the grove-like chamber. The scene faded, returning to the scouts at the wall. One by one they crawled through, disappearing into shadow. They couldn't see anything, as if they were trapped in a dark room. Their fear radiated through the smell drifting into the chamber room. Cain caught the scent of sulfur and honey, a yellow mist disappearing into his nostrils. He watched the shadow bubble from the book spreading into the room. Army of Drew, searching for something. The words didn't sound like those of one of his men, but he could feel their pain, their inability to breathe. There was no way they could have said the words. It was more like their emotion or fear, their combined thoughts sent with the message. The dark presence sent a chill down his spine. Without warning, the book exploded, sending small pieces of burning paper in all directions. The magical flames hovering over their sconces brightened, illuminating the room enough to burn away the remaining shadow. The two stood over the ruined book, watching the last bits burn to ash. That was strange, Relevance stated with a perfectly calm demeanor, refusing to show the least bit concern. You think? It seems my spell was cut. We should have seen everything that happened to them, including their deaths, if that were the case. It shouldn't have ended like that. I would have guessed your book shouldn't have exploded like that either, Cain added. Well, yes, generally that doesn't happen. Is there anything we can do? The armored man asked, more worried about his men than before. Not that I'm aware of. What's happened here is beyond my knowledge. I must speak with the Magnus. If anyone knows anything, it'll be him. Continue your duties, Cain. I'll send for you when I have something new to share. Cain nodded and returned to the archway as he had once before. The blue light swirled and the room faded. Cheers of excitement echoed through the streets surrounding Drewslayer Keep. The courtyard was full of servants, visitors, trainees, standing around the outer ward of the keep, watching the sport before them. Malachi sliced in with his battle rapier, spinning around a counterblock with the short sword in his other hand. The blows were solid and forceful, yet no harm was intended in the strikes. Crennan twisted the newly forged greatsword, deflecting the slice. Rolling his wrist, the large blade danced around for a secondary attack. The ferocity of his strike knocked the sword from his friend's hand, overpowering him. The sharpened edge nearly catching Malachi in the side. The swashbuckler jumped back, avoiding the potentially deadly blow. His offhand weapon lost to the other side of the arena. Adjusting his style, he positioned his feet and re-engaged the half-orc. Holding his reinforced blade in front of him, he paused, letting his friend advance again. Cronin adjusted, knowing the single blade would be much faster than the dual blade style. He rushed in, knocking the sword to the side with a powerful blow. Continuing forward, he shoulder-checked his opponent. Malachi forced the air from his lungs, feeling his feet leave the ground. Sucking it back in through his nose, he controlled the intake, keeping himself from pulling too much and panic with its loss. Flexing his legs, he let them absorb the impact and landed on his feet. His knees bent, he sprang back towards the larger combatant. Crennan brought the large weapon in front of him, clashing against the smaller blade. It flexed under the pressure, groaning in protest. Had it not been reinforced for the purpose of such blows, it clearly would have snapped. He looked into Malachi's eyes, seeing the exhilaration in his expression. It made him enjoy their exercises that much more. "You gonna lose," he stated defiantly, fueling the fire. "Not today, I'm not." Malachi hooked the half-orc's leg, shoving against him. Using the locked weapons to balance his stance, Crennan stumbled backwards, feeling the obstacle behind his leg. Ripping his blade free, he twisted and disengaged. "Cease battle!" The voice echoed over the clatter of the audience, reaching both combatants. They lowered their weapons, glancing toward the bailey. Cain hurried down the steps toward them. The armored warrior stepped into the courtyard, rushing past the audience. Stepping into the arena, he stopped between the two warriors. "We're needed. An urgent meeting has been requested between Rimley, Aldor, and the other lords." "We're all needed for that? Don't you and Ravion usually handle that kind of stuff?" Malachi asked. Cain spoke in a hushed tone as to not to rile the listeners. "Typically, yes, but this is different. This time we prepare for war." And that is the end of the chapter. Thank you for tuning in. And if you didn't catch it live, you'll find it on my page. We'll continue with chapter 16 next week. I am going to go write my blog post and try to relax a little bit before I have to return to work tomorrow. So thank you guys. Buy my books, leave reviews, and help me turn this into a full-time gig. I can get a lot more accomplished then. Have a good night. We'll talk to you later.